we've had, as I said, a busy day. And we just had all sorts of announcements. Very important that we had those announcements. But you do see, don't you, that the mind gets swirling with all of that? It's okay, but not all the time. It has to end. So I'd like us to begin with a quietness and to just feel our unity together as fellow seekers, fellow pilgrims on a quest. Thank you. In our first session, we started off with the idea that if one just listens to the speaker, if one just believes the speaker or doesn't believe the speaker, in this program it won't do any good. Factual information, yes. If a speaker is giving you facts, by all means, even take notes. This is a different kind of program. It's a program where you actually are the most important person, not the one standing on the stage. Because if you hope to get anything out of it, then what needs to be done is to observe your own experience, to see if what the speaker is saying is true in your experience or not. So that is the central idea to everything I've done in the first program and will do in this and the following one. We defined spiritual intuition last time. The word intuition is commonly used to mean a psychic hunch, isn't it? You get a feeling, I got a feeling that a friend was feeling slightly down in the dining room. I wasn't looking at him, but I was standing by him and I felt it. That's a psychic hunch. Valid, confirmed even by my friend, but it's not spiritual intuition. Spiritual intuition is that aha moment, which every human being gets from time to time. You are stumped with something, can't get it, can't understand it, and suddenly you go, ah, I understand. Doesn't it make you happy when that happens? Don't you have a sort of a smile on your face? If it's an insight into a principle, not factual knowledge, if you get information that there's been a terrible accident outside and a whole family has been killed, you don't go, ah, and feel happy about it. But when you suddenly understand a principle, it, I would suggest to you, inevitably brings a sense of joy. And we talked about Atma Buddhi. Unfortunately, had to use Sanskrit terms because we don't have English ones. Buddhi is that state of consciousness wherein truth itself lies, if I can put it that way, and I'm sure it's not completely accurate. No words are completely accurate, folks. For a moment, when you get that flash of understanding, your mind is, may I use a huge word, isomorphic with the divine mind, at one with, at one form with. For a moment, your mind and the divine mind is unified. And there's a flash that comes from that level on your mind, and you understand. That's theory, but isn't it true that when you get a flash of insight, one moment you don't know, and the next you do, and there's no measurable time in between. Every time that happens, I'm suggesting to you, this is from the level, one of the deepest levels of the human capability, called Buddhi. It isn't just a spiritual intuition. It's a flash of understanding of a truth, not the truth. So we then said very briefly about the idea of human evolution, that the entire human race is going through 7 major stages of human development, called root races in the literature. You can forget the term except when you come upon it, because it's a terrible one, as I said before. And we are said to be in the 5th, which is the intensive development of the mind. That's been going on post-Atlantis. The next stage, said to come not for thousands upon thousands of years, at least for the mass of humanity, is the development of this ability to have insight at will. We get it, as one scientist said, we don't know how or why or when, it just comes to us. But theoretically at least, the adepts claim, if I understand them correctly, that there will come a time when we human beings in the vast distant future will be able to focus on anything that we want to understand and get it suddenly, without going through all the processes of analysis that we go through now. That's theory, isn't it? Because we ain't there yet, pardon the French. But we all have it once in a while, don't we? So you see it's a potential, don't you, in your experience? Isn't that a potential that you all have? Now, how do we make this happen more frequently? How do we get more insight? How do we come to these hard choices, these between a rock and a hard place, as they say, not knowing what to do? How can we maybe get to the point where we can more often get these flashes of understanding which really change our lives? Isn't that important? All the theory can just be flushed away compared to something like that. Theory is valuable. I'm not putting it down. It has its place. So we're on this journey, which I suggested last time was a journey toward, most people think of it toward happiness, because everyone wants to be happy. No one wants to be miserable, do they? They might want other people to be miserable, but they don't want to be miserable themselves. So we all want to be happy. And we seek it in so many different ways. Hundreds of ways. As I said last time, most of them ending in dead ends. We're not happy. That search for happiness I suggested last time is a search for self, capital S, the inner self, the spark of the divine within, whatever one wants to call it. But the search for who you really are and what you really are. But we get distracted along the way. We're a little bit like the nursery rhyme, "Pussycat, pussycat, where have you been?" "I've been to London to see the Queen." "Pussycat, pussycat, what did you there?" "I frightened a mouse under the chair." Don't you think most people are frightening mice under the chair? And gasp, am I not doing that? It's good to have fun. Those of you who know me know I love a lot of fun. I love humor. I love to laugh. I love to see other people laugh. That's healthy. In the right place and time, of course. So there's nothing wrong with having fun. But that's all some people do, or at least try to do. And they become hopelessly lost, pathetically lost. So we're moving toward that development of insight according to Theosophical theory. And according to our own experience, it's in our potential. We can see it because we have it happening to us. And then we suggested that perhaps one of the first steps to getting to the point where we have greater understanding, where we get more flashes of understanding about whatever it is in our lives, we need to quiet the mind down. At the very beginning of tonight's program, I suggested to you that your mind was probably spinning from the activities of today and the announcements. And most of you nodded your head yes, because you knew that was true, didn't you? Insight never comes when the mind is doing that. We get the flash of understanding when the mind is quiet. Isn't it true in your experience? Just think back, or next time it happens. Albert Schweitzer spent years pondering the concept of the universal idea of the ethical. He couldn't come up with it. He was in Egypt, floating down the Nile on a barge in quietness and in nature. His mind was free. And suddenly he had that flash of understanding, reverence for life, which in a way is what the Dalai Lama said today, wasn't it? The mind has to be quiet. We in the West, perhaps especially, find that terribly difficult. When the Dalai Lama was here last, in this building, by the way, for those of you who don't know, in the early 80s, Mary and I were here and heard him speak privately to us, as well as do a public talk. Dora Kuntz was president. She was one of my mentors. I knew her for 45 years, I think it was, and counted a great privilege to have known her because I learned how to meditate by meditating with Dora in a meditation group. She said she and the Dalai Lama walked around this whole property in total silence. Neither of them needed to say a word. We find that difficult, don't we? So, to help us get quiet in the mind, I suggested one way, there are many, many ways, to think about something in nature, and we did a short meditation on nature. Sometimes, when there are so many thoughts going on in the head, it's good to focus on one, something wholesome, like a tree or a mountain. That's, in a way, a route to the goal. It is not the goal. I think sometimes in the great religious traditions they have methods for this. I don't like the word method, but I sort of have to use a word. So, the rosary in the Catholic faith. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, blessed through thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now at the hour of our death. Amen. Over and over and over, with a few Our Fathers thrown in and a Gloria. But you see, they're focused on one thing, you see. So the other thoughts sort of die. The trick is, make the leap beyond that. So that was, to some extent, what we did, and a lot more. I promised I would give you a chance to ask questions or make comments if you have any from the last time or this time. So.
Actually, your last point, what was the last point you were making about making the leap from where to where?
The last point, what I meant to convey, and obviously didn't quite, if you're using the rosary or you're meditating on the cross or the menorah, if you're Jewish, or whatever your tradition is, whatever your symbol is, or even the tree, the trick is to go beyond that image to the, let me say, to the unknown, to make the leap into the unknown, so that all the images go. The one you've been meditating on as well. Blavatsky wrote a little piece on jnana yoga, which she says is the yoga of theosophy. She thought of theosophy as jnana yoga, the yoga of knowledge. And in the last paragraph of that, the learner now knows that no form can represent reality, but all forms are narrowed reflections of the real. She phrased it a little differently than that and a little bit better, but that's the idea. So eventually, all forms go. I have meditated more or less since 1959, but I mean off and on up until about 80s, and then more or less every day. And my meditations have changed enormously, as indeed yours will. And now mine are almost totally abstract. If I'm my mind is going like that, I might think of a waterfall and just hear it and feel it running through me for a bit. And that seems to help. And then the waterfall goes. So there's all sorts of methods. That which in thee shall live forever, that which in thee knows, for it is knowledge, is not a fleeing life. It is the man that was, that is, and will be, for whom the hour shall never strike. And that is pure consciousness itself, and consciousness as focused in what we call Buddhi, or that state of truth. So that truth is within us, not our personality, but each of us has access to truth. Otherwise, we wouldn't get insights. So we all have access to that. But things block it, and from here on in, we're going to be we're going to be thinking about and looking at and observing what blocks it. Why don't we get this insight? What stops it? So when our human mind is said by Blavatsky to be our human soul, we're not going to go into a lot of theory. It takes away from what we are doing here right now. Let me just say that when consciousness is focused in Buddhi and it flashes on the mind, that's when we get the understanding, and it's the mind that is said to endure. So our real self is that aspect of our mind which can get understanding. It's not the thinking, feeling mind, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. And there aren't two minds. There's only one mind, but there's two functions. So that which goes on is that ability that we have to understand, okay? Now we come to this other aspect of the mind, and here's where the problem lies. It's called kama manas. It's the thinking, feeling part of our nature, which we call me. If you watch your experience, I think you'll discover you can't have a thought without some kind of emotion, some kind of feeling, however dim. And you can't have a feeling without some kind of thought, however dim. Now, you may wake in the morning and say, I really feel down this morning, but I don't know why. I don't have any idea why. But I bet your subconscious knows why. So there's a thought of a sort there that's causing that down feeling in the morning. So the theory, at least, is that thinking and feeling are different. You know the difference between a thought and an emotion, but you cannot separate the two, actually. And Joy Mills made up a wonderful word. She called it flinking. Combination of feeling and thinking, so flinking. So that's called, in the technical term, kama manas. And I like that term better than all the other terms that have come up, lower mind, higher mind, astral plane, all the rest of that sort of thing. So there's buddhi manas, when your mind is focused toward the principles and you get an understanding. That's one aspect. When it's focused toward the objects of sense, even the objects in the mind, it's called kama manas, and emotion is immediately associated with it. And that's where the me gets formed. What we think of as me. Now, in fragment 1 of The Voice of the Silence, we read, "Kill out desire, but if thou killst it, take heed, lest from the dead it should again arise." If we didn't have any desire, we'd become the living dead, wouldn't we? Think about it. If you never wanted to do anything, you wouldn't do anything, would you? You'd just sit. You wouldn't be able to get up after a week. Your muscles would be limp. So this couldn't mean what it appears to mean. In directing us to kill out desire, the voice of silence is not asking us to kill out emotion. If you read the Mahatma letters, you'll find that Mori and Kutumi, the principal authors of those letters, had very strong emotions. They were not cold, emotionless people. In letter number 92, K.H. wrote, he reported that Blavatsky's glowing description of Moria as, quote, an apostle of Belvedere, quote, caused him to, quote, start in anger and break his pipe while swearing like a true Christian. Now, mind you, K.H. had lived with Christians in the UK, well, in Dublin at least. Now, we tend to think of kama, or which is craving nature. We tend to think of it as lust for sex, for money, for power. But it is not just that. We can crave fine art. We can crave fine music. We can crave church services, theosophical meetings, anything. So you see, it isn't just the things that we think are bad. It's the craving that's the problem. The I can't live without. Music is phenomenally wonderful. K.H. wrote that it was the highest of the spiritual arts. He wasn't against music. But to be able to appreciate it, to love it, to be at one with it even, is wonderful. To crave it is quite another matter. You see the two differences? So, kama, or desire, or craving, is not all bad. It's part of our nature. And certainly the adepts had strong emotions. I don't think craving maybe, but strong emotions, which is a huge aspect of kama. So it's not all bad. It's part of our nature. So I'm going to ask a question. And we'll take just a few comments because I don't want to spend too long, but you can think about it afterward. What may be some positive uses of kama, this ability that we all have of emotions and desire, wishes, what we wish? Some positive things here.
Wishing that others are happy.
Yeah. His comment was wishing that others might be happy. There's a Buddhist meditation, may all beings be happy. You see, that's a desire, but it's not a personal desire, you see. What else?
Service.
Huh?
Service.
Service, okay.
World peace.
World peace. You can think of lots more. There are some really good ones. So there's a lot of things you can think of. Now, kama, desire, impels us to act. As I suggested before, if we didn't have any desire, we wouldn't do anything. So we desire something, we act. The law of the universe seems to be karma, not karma like I killed a cat in this life, so 10 has to scratch me in this life. I mean, in the last life, and 10 have to scratch me in the next life. I mean, that's simplistic. But action-reaction is a law of nature, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. It runs through the whole system. So we act. Therefore, there's going to be a reaction. Maybe it won't come for 2 lifetimes. Mostly, it comes rather quickly in this life. And we have the possibility, but not the guarantee, of learning from the response that comes. So kama impels us to act. Action creates karma. Karma gives us an opportunity to learn. Now, what the problem is, we identify with the desire and we identify with the objects of our desire. And we get attached. We become very attached. I think we all do. As I said last time, I'm talking to myself. I know I get attached. I know it very well. And I'm trying to overcome it. And I've actually made some progress. To come to the final goal may take many lifetimes. So we get attached. And then what happens? What we're attached to goes. And then we have psychological pain. Here's an example we can think about. This has happened to everybody, without exception, even children, I think, over a certain age. Let's say we've planned our day. We want everything to go just like we've planned it. It's a good plan. It's a useful plan. It may be even altruistic. We're doing something for somebody else, maybe. Planned it all out, start out, something happens. Doesn't go like we planned because, as Robert Burns, the Scottish poet, Robbie Burns, as they say in Scotland, Robbie Burns wrote, well, I'm going to use the English because the broad Scots is a little beyond me at this point without having it written. The best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. He wrote that poem, as some of you know, when he was plowing a field and he upturned a mouse's nest. And he felt sorry for the wee little creature. And the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. When that happens, doesn't it upset us? Isn't that what happens to most of us, if not all of us? You might say a few rather strong, impolite words, or stamp your feet, or whatever else, but you feel, don't you? Now, it's foolish to say you shouldn't plan. That's absolutely absurd. Of course you should plan. It's foolish to say you don't want your plans to succeed. You wouldn't make them if you didn't want them to succeed. But if they don't, this is critically important. Can you say, what do I do now? Instead of throwing a psychological tantrum inside of yourself and making everything worse. I was good at that. I could throw some really good ones and hold on to it for weeks. I can let go of a lot more of them now. So it didn't go like I planned. What now? Well, what's up? So can we actually say, after we've done that and made new plans or done whatever we can we really say this? Few things matter much. Most things don't matter at all. They seem to at that moment, don't they? They seem so important. A year from now, a month from now, 10 years from now, you might look back and say, why was that so important to me? It's all gone. So, can we see it? And can we accept it? And can we move on? Whenever we feel angry, upset, fearful, anxious, frustrated, we're reacting to blocked desire. So there's the test. I'm angry. Aha. What am I attached to? My idea. Somebody just disagreed with me. Have you been in discussion groups where someone gets angry because a view is stated they don't agree with? Mm-hmm. Has it, gasp, been you? Blocked desire. Upset because of that. Those minor flare-ups happen so often that we don't realize how much they affect us, and we don't realize how much they affect those around us. Because when we get upset, it ripples out, doesn't it? You can feel the upset in a room when somebody gets angry or very anxious. So we're not only affecting ourselves, we're affecting others. There's a wonderful story happened at the Houston airport. Mary and I were coming back from a visit to the canyons. Wonderful trip. And we had to change in Houston to fly to New York. Well, there had been electrical storms the entire day, which we didn't know about because it looked just fine when we arrived in Houston. All the flights had been canceled for most of the day. So we were supposed to leave at something like, I don't know, 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and we left at like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Well, of course, everybody was going on about the delay, and one woman behind us was fussing and fuming, and she was going to sue United Airlines. I turned around and I said, "Madam, you're going to have to sue God because the United Airlines didn't have anything to do with this." Now, there was an older man there, probably at that time about my age now, but I was much younger then. And he just took it in his stride. He was such an example of how to handle this kind of thing. He wanted to leave, like we all wanted to leave, on the plane he was booked on. And he looked up and he said, "Well, looks like we're not going to get out of here till the morning." Just as happy as could possibly be. And he got to telling us a joke. And when we suddenly heard an announcement of another flight going to one of the New York airports, and we can get home easily from any one of the 3 New York airports. We heard the announcement, and I said to Mary, let's go down to the gate and see if they have seats. We can get home earlier, you know. So we started to run, and he ran after us. And he was telling us a joke. I'm going to waste a minute or two just to tell you, because it's funny. He said, it was a Christmas joke. He said there was a little boy who was going to parochial school, Catholic school, around Christmas time. And one time he came home and he said to his parents, "I'm not going to go to school tomorrow." And his father said, "Why? Why aren't you going?" He said, "Sister told me I have to say the Christmas story in my own words, and I don't know it, and I'm not going to go to school tomorrow." I said, "Now look, we'll go over it tonight, all right? And if you forget something, I'll put a little help in just inside your trousers. All you have to do is, if you forget, you look down and see what it is, okay?" Okay. Sure enough, next day, Sister called on him. And he got up and told the story. "Well, long time ago, there was Joseph and Mary, and they lived in a town called Bethlehem. And they had to go be taxed, and there wasn't any room in the hotel, and they had to stay in a barn. And Mary didn't have any place to put the baby, and so she found where to put it when the baby came, and she would put it in a manger. And then when the baby came, she called his name, and he thought, "Oh, I didn't forget that last night. I hope Dad helped me." She called his name Calvin Klein. See what fun he had in the midst of ruined plans? See what fun you can have in the midst of ruined plans? Not easy for most of us, is it? But watch it, watch it, watch it, watch it. Realize you're getting into an emotional turmoil, making everything worse. So put your mind to doing what has to be done next. Sounds so simple, doesn't it? Not easy, but very important. One of the most difficult attachments that we have, and I confess I have this attachment to Mary, we're attached to those we love. The love is there, so is the attachment. Sometimes it's right that someone we love move out of our life or die. We are human. We are going to miss them. We are going to feel pain. But if we are brutally honest with ourselves, we will realize that it's because we've become attached and not just love. Hard, isn't it? If I lost Mary, I would be devastated. But you can bet your socks I would make every effort to think of Mary and not me. I wouldn't succeed all the time, but I'd make that effort with every ounce of my being. And when you do that, the grief process is greatly shortened. The most difficult one, perhaps, is attachment to sentient life. We don't want to die. Oh, we say, doesn't matter. I accept all that. I believe I'm Atma Buddhi Manas. Belief won't cut it, folks. Not if you're identified with that body that you claim you're not identified to. So even there, karma and attachment can cause a problem. Just going to read this. I'm not going to ask you to do it because of the time element, but I hope you'll think about it in the future. I was going to say, think of a situation that caused you psychological pain. It may be something simple, such as breaking a prized possession that had sentimental value for you. Or it may be a major event, such as losing a friend. Here's the question. Was the pain caused by blocked desire? So you look at that in yourself and say, is the reason I was upset, is the reason the pain is there is because I had blocked desire and I was attached. Then say to yourself, if I'd been able to accept the situation as something that could not be changed and moved forward, would there have been less or even no pain? And then most important of all, try to accept it as past. It's over. It's gone. It's done. And center in the now, not the memory of the past. Is this easy? No. No, it's not easy. Is it worth doing? Extraordinarily worth doing. Valuable and realistic, because it's solidly true. It is now, not then. Dora Kunz used to counsel some people who had psychological problems by saying, every morning when you get up, what is today, July 17, is it today? So if it were this morning, she'd say, well, the first thing you do when you step out of the bed is say, today is Sunday, July 17th, 2011. Because we tend to live in yesterday. Very helpful little mnemonic in a way, isn't it? We bring on the pain by living in the memory. Okay. So we've thought about quieting the mind to get insight, and we've seen, I think, if you've been looking at your experience, that you do get insight only when the mind is quiet. Not necessarily when it's quiet, because the mind can be quiet and you get no insight at all. But it never comes when the mind is active. And I think if you watch your experience, you'll see that's true. You never get a flash of understanding when your mind is busy, busy, busy. You get it when it quiets down. Now, you have to have the intent to understand, of course. You can't just sit under the Bodhi tree and say, enlighten me, because it won't happen. So you have to have that intent, and maybe a lot of work ahead before that, studying maybe. But then drop it. Free the mind. Seek the understanding itself. So we've thought about quieting the mind. We've considered a little bit the idea of attachment and how that brings psychological pain. and therefore disturbance in the mind, and preventing insight. Now, there's a theosophical limbs of life: study, meditation, and service. You notice that every one of those takes you outside of yourself. Study is obviously outside, service is obviously outside, and real meditation is also beyond the personal ego. Because if it begins with the personal ego, it ends with the personal ego. Might be able to do all sorts of things, maybe even useful things, but it's not true meditation, I don't think. Blavatsky defined meditation as the inexpressible longing of the inner self for the infinite. Nothing personal in that. So it's supra-personal, but it affects the person. Notice also that involvement in the following activities are free from the me. Something creative. Some of you are artists, you paint. Some of you dance. Some of you sing. Some of you sculpt. Something creative. Don't you find when you do that, you feel happy? You've gone beyond the me. Now, I used to folk dance, international folk dance, long before I met Mary, and I used to go to a folk dance group and enjoy it, and it was cheap, you know, a couple dollars was all. So one night I was feeling down psychologically, and I didn't have much energy, and I thought, I don't think I'll go tonight. I lived by myself at the time. I don't think I'll go. And then I thought, well, you know, maybe I will. So I went. Halfway through, I felt really great, and there was an older woman there. I was in my early 30s maybe, and she was probably about as old as I am now at the time. And I liked to dance with her when there was a couple dance instead of a line dance, because she was good. She really knew how to dance, and I had fun, and she had fun. So I'd often ask her. And I said to her in a break, I said, you know, I really didn't feel like coming here tonight. And I said, but now I feel great. And she took me by the arm, and she said, oh, dearie, I've had a really hard life. That's why I'm such a good dancer. Takes you out of yourself, see? The problem is the me. The me isn't going to evolve, I'm sorry to tell you, but it isn't. The me is the caterpillar, not the butterfly. The me has to dissolve, become amorphous, be crucified, to use other images, to die, that the inner self can be born. And you can see it in such a thing as a creative activity. The me temporarily dies. It just diminishes, doesn't it? Goes to the background, ready to spring forward again whenever it has a chance. So all of those activities take us out of ourselves. I mentioned about living in the memory. We do this all the time. The past is gone. This is the past. The past is what is now as the result of everything in the past. You can't go back in the past. Some people claim to read the Akashic records. Most of them are reading the backs of cereal boxes. But they claim that they can read the Akashic records. But if indeed anyone is looking into the past, they're not looking really at the past event. They're looking at the memory of the past event in the so-called Akashic records. Our brain allegedly remembers everything. It can be stimulated in such a way to bring a memory back that is not in our conscious mind. Isn't that so? At least I've heard that. Similarly, it is said the universe is like that. It has a kind of brain that records everything. So if anybody can get in rapport with that, they can see the past, but they're seeing now. They're seeing the memory now. It isn't back then. See, they aren't really going back. They're seeing it here and now. And the future is the potential for everything. Everything right now, the future is in a way set, but not permanently. It's set, and yet it's changing every moment, because every moment we're changing. The potentials are changing for the future every second. So we can create our future in one way, not totally, because we're part of a greater system. So the future is not yet. As St. Augustine said, he was intrigued with time. When I say I'm measuring time, what am I measuring? I can't measure the past because it no longer is. I can't measure the future because it is not yet. And I can't measure the present because the moment I try to measure the present, it's in the past. So what is the eternal now? Meditate on that one. And don't think you're going to come up with an articulated answer for it. I don't think you will. But there is the possibility in meditation of a fleeting forever where you know. So, recall some moment when you had a flash of understanding. You just take this with you, this idea. A flash of insight. Maybe it's a moment you understood a computer problem or a spiritual principle. Doesn't matter. At the moment of understanding, at that flash, was there a me? I mean, your body was still there. I'm not an idiot. But no thought of me. The knower and the known are one in that moment. Isn't that so? There's only the truth that you flashed on, that's flashed on your mind at that particular moment. So the knower and the known are one for a nanosecond. And then it's, oh, I got it, and you want to tell somebody, or all the rest of it. But for that flash, me isn't there. And there's joy with it. Blavatsky says Buddhi is cosmic ideation. And then she says it's bliss. Every time you get that flash of understanding, there's a little flash of bliss that runs through you. You see? So you can take that one along with you. Next time, we'll begin again with a little meditation, short meditation, opportunity for questions. Then we're going to deal with crystallized belief, one of the most powerful blocks to insight. Absolute killer. And even we Theosophists fall victim to it. Reactive habit, equally dangerous. Psychological habits, not smoking and the like, which are not good habits, but they're a piece of cake to get rid of compared to the psychological ones we'll deal with. And we'll have a little bit more on meditation and some suggestions of what we might do on a daily basis in our everyday life to become more and more aware of this central problem that brings us pain. It is possible to free ourselves from so much psychological suffering. Maybe not all, but to free ourselves from so much. And by freeing ourselves, our mind is more open, calm, receptive to truth, and it changes us. And we can then really get a sense of humanity as a whole, bit by bit. And when any of that comes to us, altruism is the inevitable consequence. Thank you.